The announcement came buried in a late Friday press release from the Department of Homeland Security. 14 words that will reshape North American geography. The administration has authorized preliminary construction of permanent border infrastructure along the northern frontier. Within hours, satellite imagery showed surveying crews already deployed across Montana, North Dakota, and Minnesota. Equipment was moving into position. Contracts had already been signed. This was not a proposal. This was not a negotiating tactic. Construction has already begun. The United States is building a wall on the Canadian border, and the implications extend far beyond concrete and steel. For generations, the border between the United States and Canada represented something unique in the world, the longest undefended international boundary on the planet. Nearly 4,000 miles where neighbors crossed freely, where communities straddled the line, where the concept of a border existed more on maps than in daily reality. That era is ending. The scale of what the administration has authorized defies easy comprehension. Initial planning documents obtained by journalists describe a phased construction project spanning 15 years, with a total estimated cost exceeding $200 billion. The first phase focuses on what officials call high-priority sectors. These include major highway crossings, population centers near the border, and areas identified as vulnerabilities for illegal crossing. When pressed on this discrepancy, officials pivoted to economic arguments. They claimed the wall would prevent Canadian goods from entering outside official channels. They suggested that agricultural products were being smuggled to avoid tariffs. They implied that the trade conflict with Canada required physical enforcement mechanisms beyond what currently exists. This argument collapsed under scrutiny almost immediately. Trade experts pointed out that the overwhelming majority of Canadian imports arrive through official ports of entry, where tariffs are already collected. The notion that smuggling across remote forest borders constitutes a significant trade enforcement problem has no support in available data. Customs officials privately expressed bewilderment at the suggestion. The third justification emerged more recently and reveals the actual strategic thinking behind the project. Administration officials have begun describing the wall as necessary infrastructure for a new relationship with Canada. They frame it as establishing clarity. They speak of defining where America ends and foreign territory begins. They talk about psychological impact and national identity. This language exposes what the wall actually represents. It is not a security measure. It is not a trade enforcement tool. It is a symbolic declaration that Canada is no longer a partner, but an adversary. It is physical infrastructure designed to manifest a political posture. It is the conversion of ideology into concrete. The reaction from Ottawa has been measured but unmistakably firm. Prime Minister Carney delivered a statement calling the wall an affront to the relationship between our peoples that will not soon be forgotten. Canadian officials have announced they will not cooperate with construction in any way. They will not provide access to Canadian territory for surveying. They will not coordinate on environmental assessments. They will not participate in planning for shared waterways. This non-cooperation creates immediate practical problems. The border runs through the middle of rivers and lakes that cannot be divided by physical barriers without Canadian involvement. It crosses through Indigenous territories that span both nations with treaty rights that predate either country. It traverses ecosystems where construction would cause environmental management requiring joint management. The administration's response to these complications has been to ignore them. Officials have stated that American sovereignty permits construction on American soil without Canadian consent. They have dismissed environmental concerns as secondary to security imperatives. They have shown no interest in consultation with Indigenous nations whose territories would be disrupted. Legal challenges are already accumulating. Environmental organizations have filed suits arguing that construction violates federal law, requiring impact assessments before major infrastructure projects. Indigenous groups have initiated litigation claiming treaty violations. Property owners along the border who face eminent domain seizures have begun contesting the takings in court. These legal obstacles will slow construction, but likely cannot stop it. The administration has invoked emergency authorities that provide broad discretion to waive environmental and procedural requirements. Previous court challenges to border wall construction on the southern border largely failed. The legal architecture that enabled construction there can be applied here. What the courts cannot address is the economic devastation the wall will cause to communities along the northern border. Consider a town like Derbyline, Vermont. The border runs directly through the community. The public library straddles the line. Residents cross back and forth daily for work, for shopping, for family visits. The border has been a geographic detail rather than a barrier. A wall changes everything. It severs connections that have existed for centuries. It transforms neighbors into foreigners separated by concrete. Multiply this by hundreds of communities along the border. Small towns whose economies depend on cross-border commerce. Businesses that serve customers from both nations. Families divided by a line that meant nothing until it suddenly meant everything. The human cost is incalculable. The economic cost is merely enormous. Cross-border trade between the United States and Canada exceeds $700 billion annually. Much of this trade flows through small crossings that would be affected by wall construction. Delays and disruptions at these crossings ripple through supply chains. Manufacturing plants that depend on just-in-time delivery face production shutdowns. Agricultural products that require rapid transport face spoilage. The efficiency that made North American economic integration successful disappears. Industry groups have been sounding alarms since the announcement. The automotive sector, which moves parts across the border multiple times during production, warns of catastrophic disruption. Agricultural organizations describe potential losses in the billions. Retail associations predict price increases for consumers as transportation costs rise and supply chains fragment. The administration has dismissed these warnings as exaggerated. Officials claim that legitimate trade will continue through designated ports of entry. They promise that crossing procedures will remain efficient. They insist that the wall targets illegal activity rather than legal commerce. These assurances contradict the physical reality of what a wall creates. Every barrier is also a choke point. Every checkpoint is also a delay. The volume of cross-border traffic that currently flows through numerous small crossings cannot be funneled through a handful of major ports without creating massive congestion. The infrastructure does not exist to handle the concentrated flow. Building that infrastructure would cost additional billions and take additional years. Meanwhile, the message the wall sends reverberates far beyond North America. American allies worldwide are watching the United States construct a barrier against its closest friend. They are drawing conclusions about what American partnership means. They are calculating whether their own relationship with Washington might someday warrant similar treatment. The symbolism is devastating precisely because of what the Canadian border has always represented. If America walls off Canada, there is no nation on earth that can consider itself safe from American suspicion. The wall announces that proximity and partnership provide no protection. It declares that shared values and shared history count for nothing when political winds shift. European officials have privately expressed alarm. Asian allies have requested clarification about whether similar measures might affect their relationships. The diplomatic damage extends to every corner of American foreign policy. The wall undermines every argument about American leadership and American reliability. For Canada specifically, the wall accelerates a strategic reorientation already underway. Every Canadian policymaker now operates from the assumption that the United States cannot be trusted as a long-term partner. Every Canadian investment decision accounts for the possibility of American hostility. Every Canadian trade relationship is evaluated partly on its ability to reduce dependence on American markets. China has already indicated willingness to expand economic ties with Canada. European nations have expressed interest in deeper partnerships. Canada is not isolated by American pressure. Canada is liberated from assumptions about American friendship that constrained its options for decades. The construction timeline ensures that the wall will define American politics for years to come. Each phase will require new appropriations. Each appropriation will require political fights. Each fight will force elected officials to declare their position on whether America should wall itself off from its neighbor. Some Republican legislators have already expressed private reservations. They represent districts where cross-border commerce matters. They hear from constituents whose businesses and families will be disrupted. They understand that the wall creates problems for their voters even if it satisfies the party's base. Democratic opposition has been vocal, but faces the challenge of articulating an alternative vision. Simply opposing the wall is not sufficient. The political environment requires explaining what relationship with Canada should look like and how American interests are served by cooperation rather than confrontation. This debate will shape American foreign policy far beyond the Canadian border. The wall forces a confrontation with fundamental questions. Is America strengthened by barriers or connections? Is security achieved through isolation or partnership? Is prosperity built on integration or separation? The administration has answered these questions with concrete and steel. They have bet that American voters want walls more than they want allies. They have wagered that symbolic toughness matters more than practical consequences. They have calculated that the satisfaction of building a barrier outweighs the costs of what the barrier destroys. History will judge whether this calculation was correct, but history will be written by people living with the consequences. Workers who lose jobs when factories close. Families who cannot visit relatives across a line that never divided them before. Communities that wither when commerce flows elsewhere. Consumers who pay higher prices for goods that once moved freely. The wall will stand as a monument to a particular vision of America. An America that trusts no one. An America that sees threat in every direction. An America that believes strength means separation and safety means solitude. Whether this vision serves American interests or destroys them is no longer a theoretical question. Construction crews are already at work. The concrete is already being poured. The wall is rising along a border that remained open for 2 centuries because both nations understood that openness served their interests better than barriers.